welcome to the Quantum Success Show, where you can get your information and inspiration to create your desires. As you can see, I have a very beautiful friend next to me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Cynthia Pasquella Garcia. She is a celebrity nutritionist, transformational expert, best-selling author, in-demand speaker, TV and media personality, and philanthropist. She is the founder and CEO of the Institute of Transformational Nutrition, which is ITN, a company that makes it easy for health coaches to do the work that they love by teaching them a proven coaching process that leaves them confident and credible so that they can be the powerful force in the world that they want to be. Cynthia is one of the most beautiful women I know, and her outside's pretty great too. But from the inside out, I mean, I just never have met a more beautiful soul. So Cynthia, thank you so much for being here.
Christy, thank you. Thank you for saying such kind things. I said to you earlier, every time I feel like I have low self-esteem, I want to come and hang out with you. This is fantastic.
Well, it's funny that you say low self-esteem, right? Because I don't care what level we are, who we are, we all have those moments of self-doubt and, you know, those times where it feels good to just be around people that are positive and that uplift us. And, you know, being able to be your friend and being in your presence is such a gift for me. So thank you.
Well, I feel the same. And you're right. It is so important. You know, it's so important that we have the people around us to support the work that we're doing in the world, to just support us. I mean, we all, like, no woman is an island, right? No man is an island. And it's, we all, I think, need that connection and that inspiration and that motivation and just, again, overall support to do anything and everything that we're doing in the world, you know, whether it's just being a woman, being a mom, being a businesswoman or a businessman, whatever the case might be, you can't do it alone.
No, absolutely. I want to dive into your story, because when I found out where you came from and what has really led you to the work that you're doing now, it was, for me, I mean, it opened my heart. I had so much compassion, and yet I gained so much more just confident, not in confidence, it was more just a sense of like, wow, where you've come from and who you are and what you've created in your life. I mean, just so much admiration for who you are. So I'd love for you to share your story of how you have created massive quantum success in your life. And it doesn't matter where you've come from. You know, I think people think that if you come from humble beginnings that you can't create massive success, and you're a perfect example of quantum success. So would you mind sharing that? Your story?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. And, you know, I love that you start here, because I feel like we don't know each other's stories. You know, we see people on the street, or we meet people at, you know, business networking events or whatever the case might be, and we see them as they are today. But we don't see the process that it took them to get to where they are now. We don't know their stories. And sometimes, you know, we judge, we compare, we think, oh gosh, I could never do that. But we don't know what their journey has been like. So I love that you start here, and I'm happy to share my story. Several years ago, gosh, I guess 15 years ago now, time flies, I found myself on the cold floor of my tiny studio apartment in Los Angeles. And I had a handful of pills, and I had just made the decision to end my own life. For months prior to this, I had been very, very sick. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I was about 25 pounds overweight. I had horrible cystic acne breakouts on my face, my neck, my back, my chest. And I suffered from brain fog, from memory loss, and I was exhausted from morning to night. It didn't matter if I slept, you know, 14 hours. I couldn't get through my days, and I couldn't work because I was so sick. So I was broke. I mean, my bank account, I think, had a few $100s in it. And obviously that's very terrifying, you know, and I was in a city where I had no family. And what I come to find out was that I also had no close friends either. And so it was a very scary time in my life. And, you know, that morning I woke up and I really had a renewed commitment to getting healthier again. You know, I had been going through this for months, and that morning I woke up, Christy, I thought, maybe today's the day. Maybe today's the day that it'll just all come together. And so I got in the shower, determined to change my life that day. You know how sometimes we get up and we're like, today's the day. And I got in the shower, and that's when I found lumps in both of my breasts. And that was my breaking point. And I just completely hit rock bottom. And if you remember those old television sets, I remember growing up, my grandparents had those big, huge television sets that sat on the floor. And you turn them off and the screen goes black,
Yes.
just sort of like quickly, but then you see this little pinhole of light, right?
Yes.
And that's all that's left. And then that fades too. That's what happened to me that day in the shower. And I remember just sinking to the floor, and I just put my arms around myself. And I remember I just started rocking back and forth, just back and forth, kind of like you would rock a child, right? To console them. And I don't know how long I sat there. The next thing I remember, I was shivering because the water had turned cold. So I got out and just really sat in this fog throughout the day and throughout the night. And, you know, the thing is, like a lot of people going through their health struggles, I tried everything. You know, I worked with doctors and trainers and nutritionists, and I did body work and energy healing. And, you know, I drank the shakes and I popped the pills, and nothing was working. And I was really trying. And so that night, sitting there in the corner, I felt hopeless, and I felt defeated, and I felt worthless. And I really believed that the only way out of my suffering that night was to end my own life. And I was completely resigned to that fact and to my fate. And I sat there, and the longer I sat there, I started to just sort of wonder, like, why me? And it made me really angry, I guess. I was angry at myself for letting myself get to that place. I was angry at the people that I went to for help that, you know, didn't really help me. I was angry at God, Christy. I was just so mad. And I kept saying, why me? Why me? Because the thing was, you know, that illness wasn't the start of my struggle here in this earth school. Dealing with crazy challenges was nothing new for me. Like, I had lived a life that required me to be a survivor. I grew up in extreme poverty. We had no running water in the house. There was no indoor plumbing. There was an outhouse that we had to go outside and like walk down this path to use if we needed to go to the bathroom. And I remember going hungry many times. In fact, I was just writing, I'm working on a new book, and I was just writing this a couple of days ago. And I was remembering the time that I was hungry one day. My parents, I'm not sure where they were. I don't have that recollection. But what I do remember is that I went to the cupboard in the kitchen, and I opened the door, and there was an onion skin and a rotting potato.
Oh my gosh.
And that was all. And so I was hungry, and you know, my home was also filled with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic abuse. My, you know, dad tried to murder my mother a few times. And I was also sexually abused as a young child. It started when I was just 6 years old. So that night in the dark, feeling so alone, just on the floor, I felt like I had been fighting my entire life. And I was so sick and tired of fighting. I was exhausted, Christy.
I can imagine. Jeez.
I sat there, and as I'm saying, like, why me? Why me? And I'm feeling that anger, and I had just surrendered to just ending it all. I heard this voice from inside, and some might call it God. You might say it's an aha moment, a divine download. For me, it was a wake-up call, but it just said, it's not happening to you. It's happening for you. And I got that. I really got that that night. I understood that.
Sorry for a second. You didn't say, shut the hell up.
Yeah, I mean,
bullshit.
I was shocked, to be really honest with you, because it was such a clear voice. And maybe you've experienced this. I've experienced it since then, but had never experienced it up until that point. It was just shocking. Like, where'd that come from? You know, but I was also just at a point where I was so open, because here's the thing. And I wonder if you have experienced this. I said I'm a survivor, right? So my childhood was very volatile, as I've said. Things could just go crazy at at any moment. It was a very dangerous situation for me. And so what I learned to do was to control things, right? So because I thought, well, if I can control things, then I'm safe.
Right.
Right. So I had spent my entire life up until this point that night trying to control things. That's why I was going to the doctors and the trainer and doing all of this stuff, because I thought, surely I can do this. I'm in control here, because that's all I had ever known. But what happened that night was a complete letting go and a surrendering to something bigger than me. I just, for the first time, my heart was broken completely. Oh, I had nothing left. I couldn't fight. I didn't have the energy to control anymore. I was done, and I just surrendered to whatever was coming. And I think that was a really powerful time for me. And it's something that ever since that moment, I have chosen to actively practice letting go and surrendering. And I'm not perfect at it. And it's still a practice, but I work at it every day. But that was the thing, I feel like, that really allowed that bigger message to come through. And I think that's, probably why that had been the first time that I experienced that.
Oh God, your story is just amazing. As much as we've been together, I mean, I know your earlier start, but I didn't know that you were literally about to kill yourself and take your life. And let me just say thank
Yeah.
you. And I'm glad that you were open to hearing that voice. Selfishly, because you are just such a bright light, and I feel happy in your presence. But not even just for me, but for millions of people that you have helped, and to now know where you are. And I'd love for you to share that, because I know you, and when I first met you, it was like first time I met you in a beautiful Malibu house, dressed to the nines. We both have a passion for Valentino shoes.
We do.
Uh, and just this beautiful, fit, healthy woman. So to even hear that story, knowing you, who you are now, and I didn't mention a heart of just an angel. I think one day we were together, and I'm like, I just see your angel wings behind you. I mean, you just have this beautiful presence and this beautiful way about you to serve and to help people. So it's amazing to hear that story. So thank you. I just want to say that to you.
Well, thank you for saying that. And truly, it means a lot to me. This is my life. It's my mission. It's what I do. And what's funny, Christy? I, like a lot of people, before this happened, I was very young, but I thought, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What is life all about? And I was a seeker, very much a seeker, even before I had this sort of rock bottom experience. Like, why am I here? What am I meant for? And the other cool thing that happened that night, just to to not leave you hanging, I heard this voice, it's happening for you, not to you. And I also heard, like, you're meant for greatness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, for someone like me who grew up being told that I was worthless, that I was hopeless, that I would never amount to anything, for me to hear and feel like I was meant for greatness, and I still tear up over this.
Me too, by the way. I'm tearing up as you say that, 'cause
It
it's
was a
true.
really pivotal moment for me. For me to think that I was meant for greatness was just the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Now that's where it got crazy. Like the to you, like for you, not to you, that was okay. But that I was meant for greatness was wild. But what I realized is that greatness was my birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And it is your birthright too. It is the birthright of everyone who is listening to us today. You were born worthy of the absolute best that life has to offer. You just have to step up and embrace it. You wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case, right? There are no extra humans. You're here for a reason, and you're meant for greatness. So I knew in that moment what I needed to do. I thought, well, okay, if that's the case, I need to get it together, right? I need to figure out what is going on with me. I need to understand why I'm like this. So I made a deal with God that night, and whether that's the universe to you or what have you, I committed to doing everything I could to understand why I got to this place, what was going on, what the root causes were, and to heal that. And I basically said, if you'll open the door, I'll walk through it. And so I remember I got up off the floor and I went to my computer, being very grateful for Google in that moment. And look, I knew nothing about nutrition. I had been told such conflicting information from everyone that I had turned to. But what I did know was that I needed to have an education. And so I looked for nutrition programs, for certification programs. Like, how do I learn? Because education was the one thing that I'd always counted on to pull me out. Books were my savior, right? They taught me everything I needed to know to really run my life. I depended on them so greatly because I didn't have anyone or anything else. So I found a program, and I remember I put it on 3 credit cards because I had no money. But that was okay because I was investing in the only thing I had left to invest in, and that was me. And so, I studied, I dug into all these facets of nutrition. I understood, proteins, carbs, all of that. But I also understood that I had underlying trauma that had never been resolved, and that it was really functioning as the root cause of so much of my illness. Spiritually, I was bankrupt. I had no strong connections. I wasn't even connected to myself, let alone a higher power or other people, right? Something deeper. I didn't have any really solid relationships in my life of any kind. So I started putting these things together. So I thought, it's not just the science of nutrition, there's a psychology component. And more importantly, or just as importantly, there's a psychology component. So I put those 3 things together, and I called it transformational nutrition because that's what it was for me. I was able to heal completely. It wasn't overnight, but over time, my skin cleared up, the weight fell off, my symptoms resolved themselves, the foggy brain went away, and I was able to be vital again, and just in the moment, and healthy. And the lumps in my breast turned out to be fibrous, not cancerous, which I was so grateful for. And it's interesting because that moment of just terror I had in the shower that day came flooding back several years later, because my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it just triggered that. And I was like, whoa, how lucky am I, right? And so I started working with people who were going through the same things that I was going through, helping them to heal, helping them to transform. They saw tremendous results. And that's when I thought, well, I got to teach this to other people, and I got to make it foolproof. So I took everything I did and I put it into systems, whether it was, helping with autoimmune illnesses or diabetes or digestive health or whatever. And I made a personalized health coaching system. So there's no guesswork. You can't mess it up. And so it was really powerful. And by this time, I'd been able to build a really successful business. I was working with a lot of celebrity clients. I was featured in magazines and TV. I worked for, the Today Show, the Dr. Phil Show, and the Doctors, Revenge Body with Khloe Kardashian, which I still work with her as the nutritionist for her show. And so I put all of that into a system too, because I thought, you can't help anyone if you can't pay your rent, right? So I built into a business building system. And that's when I started the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. And I'm just so grateful. It's a dream of mine to show other people how to step into that greatness that's inside of them, and to help heal, people's health, their hearts, and truly the planet. So it feels really good to be doing what I'm doing now. And that's the journey. It wasn't, certainly not overnight, and I didn't just start at the top, but I started, and that's what changed everything.
Well, I think your story gives a lot of people hope, because no matter what we find ourselves in, we're human, right? So we have conditions or circumstances or relationships that we're in, or, that we maybe are really traumatic, or, to the places where we just don't like them. I mean, contrast shows up for us as humans, no matter how big or small or little. But to hear someone that has gone through the struggle that you have gone through, and then to just make that decision, make that commitment, and to do something about it, and then see the massive success that you've become, and not only for yourself, but to turn around and do that for so many other people. It's remarkable, Cynthia. You're just really such a gift, and I love that you shared that, we're all meant for greatness, because you're right. It's not just you. It's not just me. What I tell my kids is like, you think about how many sperm, had to swim to go and penetrate that egg. Like
Yeah.
you already won. Like you're meant to be here, because there's trillions of other ones that didn't get in. And so like with the egg became who you became. It's like you're already a winner. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have the ability. You wouldn't have you have purpose. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's true. And it's really easy to forget that.
Yes.
It really is, because life gets in the way and it's tough out there. It's a crazy world that we live in these days. And I think that all of us, face these challenges in our everyday lives, whether it's in your relationships or your careers or even with yourself, and we constantly see people who are put on these pedestals, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with those people. They work very hard to get there. But what we do is we compare ourselves to them, right? And I think it was Teddy Roosevelt who said that comparison is the thief of joy.
Hmm.
And it's so true, right? It's like, but what we don't understand is that we are all in the perfect space for us in that moment. Like right where you are right now is perfect. That's where you should be. Like I hear people saying, oh, I should be more successful. I should have more money by now. I should have had children already. I should have found that man and settled down, or that woman and settled down. And my response is, no, you shouldn't. You're perfect right now, right here. This is exactly where you're supposed to be, right? Now, you can choose at any given moment to direct the path that you're on. And I encourage you to do that. Otherwise, you're just sitting on the sidelines of your own life, right? But everything right now and where you are is perfect. So start from there and start from that knowing, because if you don't, then you're just beating yourself up, right? You're just thinking about all the things that you're not instead of focusing on what you are. And as long as you do that, you're never going to step into your greatness, because you can't even see that it exists.
Right. When you're in that place of looking at what's wrong and bad, you're in lack. And you can never attract abundance or success or the love or the things that you want from a place of lack. It vibrationally defies law. You cannot even get to that place. So what you're saying is just accepting that I'm here where I'm at. It is, it is perfect for who I'm becoming and for what I'm wanting to create, and then start focusing in the direction of what you do want, and what you as the co-creator of, the non-physical part of you, what you need to do to take the action to create the life that you want. Like you said, you picked yourself up off the floor. You went over to your computer and looked on Google. You were the one that did the research. I mean, these are things that you, from a human perspective, you got the divine download that you're meant for greatness. And then you did something with that. You had that information, and then you did something about it. It wasn't like you're waiting for something, to happen, to make it better for you. You took that inspiration and did something with it, and co-creatively have manifested an amazing life for yourself because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to realize that no one's coming to save you.
Right.
I think that's a big thing. And I'll tell you, for me to take action, I first had to understand what action and why. So what happened for me was I had to get out of my head and get into my heart.
Yes.
Because my head was, how do I solve this problem? What supplements do I take? How do I lose weight? How do I get healthy? What do I, it was that. And it's just, it's wild in there.
Yes.
In my head, it's crazy, right? But in my heart, things are very, very clear. And I had ignored that because I thought, well, you just think your way out of things, right? You solve problems. We're very logical. We're very analytical. But most of the problems in our life aren't solved by using our head. They're solved by using our heart. We just have to be able to tune into that. And so many of us, myself included, don't. And I certainly didn't up until that point. I told you it was all about control, thinking my way through it, being a survivor, right? But when you can let go and you can step back and you can open your heart and you can listen to that inner knowing, right? That intuition. And we all have it, it's like, don't go in there, but we all have it. We just don't always listen to it, right?
Yes.
But if you can do that, and if you can trust it, and that takes practice, right? Again, over time, not overnight, then it becomes easier to step up and do the next right action, right? It's very hard to know what that is in your head. But if you listen to your heart and you surrender and you let go and you open and you're open to hearing what the next right step is, and then you're committed to taking action, that's the process that will actually get you toward closer to where you want to be. Does that make
Absolutely. It
sense?
makes perfect sense because, I talk about the seven essential laws, and one of the laws is the law of allowing. And when you are
Mm-hmm.
controlling, you are not allowing. And so what
That's right.
the infinite possibilities that and the just all the possible solutions that our own minds can't even understand or grasp or even have any conscious awareness of, when we're controlling and we're forcing the whole entire infinite universe into this little tiny hole,
That's right.
and it's saying it's got to be that way, it's got to go that way, and we're
That's right.
forcing it instead of, like you're saying, sitting back, opening your heart, connecting with infinite possibilities, and then
Mhm.
seeing what does transpire in your life from that place of allowing, not controlling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being, and just, and doing the work then after, right? So, and that's really what my process was. It was understanding and being open to receiving, like you just said, and then just taking the next right step, just walking through the next door that had been opened for me. And when you do that, you're in such alignment, you'll be shocked at the things that come your way, the opportunities that come, the doors that get opened, right? and
Yes.
and you just you just stay on that path, you just stay in alignment. And it's not perfect, and I get off I go off-roading all the time, right?
We're
But I
human.
know
We're
now how to
human.
pull myself back, and I
Yeah.
know when I'm doing that. And I've got to the point where I can become the observer, and I can say, oh, this is me doing that thing again. And now
Yes.
I know how to just get back on course, right? Because I went through a lot of trauma, like many of us have. We've all suffered such traumatic experiences. I mean, if you were born, you have trauma,
Yeah.
right? And so we don't think about that though. And we numb it out and we're like, oh, that doesn't affect me anymore. I don't think about it, so it doesn't affect me. And that's just not true. It does, whether you realize it or not, whether you feel it or not, whether you think it or not, it does affect you. It affects every action you take, every time you hesitate, every time you play small. Those are all ways that you're protecting yourself, that you're being a survivor. And I still fall into that, because life is a lot sometimes. And sometimes it's easier to just fall into that self-protection mode, and just sort of hide for a little bit. But it really is about doing that inner, deeper work. And it never ends, by the way. Good news. Never ends, but it's always worth it.
Rewarding.
Worth
So
the investment.
rewarding. Absolutely. I remember
So
one day thinking, God, how long do I have to work on myself till I'm alive? But every time I go to that next, okay, whew, I've let go of that trauma, or I've let go of that way of thinking,
yeah.
or I've let go of that mindset, or realized a place in my life where I was in lack and switched into abundance. It's like, oh, like the sense of freedom and expansion that happens from that. So my
Yeah.
commitment, I always say, like, I love my work that I do in the world, but my real work is work on myself. It's
Yeah.
constant and it's always. So
I think that's the dirty little secret, right? So this
yeah.
is really funny. So this is kind of a funny story. So when I was in my 20s and I thought, I was seeking, why am I here? What I'm having all these problems, and like we all do. And I remember, Christy, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go get enlightened, because I had seen enough spiritual books. I had no idea what they really said, right? Like the time I decided I was going to just become a spiritual being, I went and got Ram Dass' book, Be Here Now. And I couldn't understand a word of it. I had no idea. He's my greatest teacher now. He's my guru. But at the time, I had no idea. So I picked up Louise Hay's book and I was like, you can heal your life. Let's start here,
Yeah.
But my plan was to just get enlightened, because I saw these spiritual leaders and I thought, well, if I just get enlightened, and then I'll be good for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
and which was so silly. And I realized that now, because once I got into the work, I was like, oh,
Oh.
it never ends. It never, ever ends. And then once
Yes.
you can't unknow, you can't just turn it off. So I was like, well, I
I
guess
always
we're in this,
I always say you can't unbirth a baby. You just can't put it back in. Like once you know, you're like, oh man, you know.
Right? I
Yes.
know. I wanted to. I wanted to at times. I still want to sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to know, but
Yes.
because it's hard, but it's why we're here. It's the journey. And I've actually started telling this to my daughter, and if you have small children, maybe this will be helpful if anyone's listening with small children. She'll complain that about having to do things, or she gets scared, in new environments or whatever the case might be. Meeting new people is very frightening for her. She's anxious, my little anxious girl. And I've been telling her, baby, you're here to do hard things. You were made to do hard things. And what I'm trying to do is to help her understand. She's only 7, but I'm trying to help her understand from a very young age that it's that the hard things are there to serve you. And that's why you're here. If you were perfect and good and nothing bothered you, you wouldn't be in the earth school, right? That's why you're here. You're made to do hard things so that you can, do the next thing in your life. Because I firmly believe that everything that we encounter in this moment and the difficulties that we go through are just making us stronger for the next thing that we're going to encounter. And so I'm trying to relay that, at a young age. It's funny too. She was baking pretzels of all things last week, and I just knew Christy. She wanted to do it on her own, and I just knew. I felt it. Moms feel this stuff, and I was like, I'm afraid she's going to get burned. We escaped the oven, but when we got the pan out, she accidentally touched it, and she has this little burn on her finger. And I was like, oh, it broke my heart. But the thing was, I tried to help her understand, like, the little burns happen now so that you learn from them. And ideally, it helps you to prevent the big burns later in life. So we learn from the
Exactly.
small things, right? The hard things when we're young.
Yes.
These are our lessons. And so I'm just trying to instill that in her because I didn't learn it until I was so much older.
Yes. And if you weren't allowed to make mistakes, we just had something happen with Maxim where we have 3 air conditioning units in our house, and it's hot here in Arizona. And the one upstairs went out, so Frederick had someone come and fix the unit and everything. So everything was running fine. And then when Maxim and Alex got home from school yesterday, Maxim went up to the thermometer and he pushed heat on, right? So Frederick goes upstairs and he's like, oh, the air conditioning's still not working. What's going on? So he calls the company back. The guy comes back, checks everything out, and he sees like the thermometer's on heat, right? So Frederick comes up to Maxim and says, you're not supposed to touch the thermometer. I go, yeah, the rule in the house is only the men, like only the dad. If you've seen, what is it, Daddy 2 or Daddy's Home 2, only the men in the family are allowed to touch the thermometer. Like the kids are allowed to touch it. But it was like that face of like, oh, he just didn't know. And how else do we know unless we make a mistake or go through something, pick up the pan and get our fingers burned. So, and then hopefully we learn so we don't do it again. I mean, that's, it's a whole process of growth, but
Yeah.
you're amazing. I love you. I'm so grateful for you. I know you have a gift to give everybody, so I'd love for you to share what that is. We're going to put a link underneath the video so everybody can just go click on it there. But if you wouldn't mind sharing what your gift is.
I'd love to. Yeah. So one of the things that I really focus on is healing trauma. And I do all of this work through this practice of transformational nutrition. And one of the things that, I shared with you as I was going through this struggle that I realized was that I was bankrupt spiritually, right? That I didn't understand how to heal traumas. And the biggest thing was that I was so hungry, Christy. I was starving to death, and not just from not having the right nutrients. My soul, my heart, my mind, I wasn't being fed. And so I think that a lot of us are very hungry for things these days. We have a lot of voids in our lives, and we try to fill them with things like food or gambling or shopping, even if it's Valentino's shoes,
Been there,
or
done
sex,
that.
or whatever the case might be, right? We all have our things. But the thing is, we're never going to fill those voids, those hungers, with anything except what we are actually hungry for, what we're really hungry for. We're not hungry for food or shoes or whatever the case might be. We're hungry for love. We're hungry for connection. we're hungry for the truth of who we are. We're hungry for courage. We're hungry for bravery. We're hungry for success, right?
Yeah.
And so I created a program, and it's called the Hungry Method. And it's a 6-week program that we walk you through. It's a full-on program that helps you discover what those deepest hungers are, so that you can turn your deepest pain into your greatest power,
Love
right?
it.
And so it's totally free. I want to give that to you guys. We sell it on our site, but for you, you can just go to cynthiagarcia.com/quantum success, and you can set up an account and go through the whole 6-week program, and discover what you're really hungry for.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful gift. And we'll also have it right under the videos too. So thank you for your generosity in that. That's very kind. And I'm sure you're going to help a lot of people in my community that are still feeling like they're hungry for something, that they still are not fulfilled and not feeling that alignment that we've been talking about. So thank you so much, Cynthia. Any final thing you want to say before we get going?
I think just on that last note, it's important to remember that we're all hungry. I'm still hungry. And some days I'm hungry for connection. Sometimes I'm hungry for just a little snuggle, or someone to tell me it's going to be okay. Sometimes, Christy, I'm hungry for a cheeseburger. I mean, I just am. So
My producer, Rob, is shaking his head.
Rob, you don't understand the cheeseburgers my husband makes. They're so good. No, but it's true. It's like we just need to be fed, right?
Yeah.
So really discovering what feeds us is a lifelong pursuit, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're still hungry, that's okay. I hope you're always hungry. I hope you're always just ravenous for that next best version of yourself, whatever that is. So just a little reminder before we leave. And thank you, Christy, so much for having me on your show. I am such a fan of yours. I look up to you in so many ways. I am just so impressed by who you are and what you've built, and the work that you're doing in the world. And, on my journey, I'm often looking for people who inspire me and motivate me to keep going. And you're one of those people. So it's a real treat to be on your show and to share my story with your audience. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Just touched my heart, and now I'm crying. So
This is the crying episode.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, that's really just pierced my heart. So thank you, sweetie. You just have such a generous, beautiful heart. And I appreciate you being here. So thank you. And thanks to all of you. Let me know what you're taking away. I want to hear, what was the big ahas that you had during this discussion and listening into our conversation. And I really encourage you. I know Cynthia's work is fantastic and amazing. So I encourage you to go check out the link, put in your information, and start the process of really learning more about yourself and what you are really hungry for, and start fulfilling that need. So thank you, everybody. Have an amazing week. Thank you, Cynthia. See you soon, sweetie.
Thank you, Christy.